Greetings, Folkaroos. It's Haley, and welcome back to another video. And this one, as you may notice, is a little bit sooner than a week after my last one. And that is because this week, yesterday, Monday, I went to a different chess meetup a little bit further away from where I live. It's pretty similar to the one I go to every week. And I played some very interesting games there. I went 4-0. We played 4 games. I won 4 games. I played 2 games against a 800 rated opponent and 2 games against a 1200 rated opponent. And this time, I am going to try something a little different. I'm going to try to make my videos a little bit more interactive for the audience. So, like, when I have an important or like fun move that happens in the games or that theoretically could have happened, I'm going to pause it and see if the audience can find it. It'll like make it a little bit more interactive instead of just passively consuming the game, passively just like having it on in the background or whatever. All right, that's enough rattling. Let's head on into the first game. So when I walked in there, there was, you know how these things normally work. There's like everyone else is playing a game, and you walk in, and there's like one guy who's not playing a game, so you offer him to play a game. And this guy turned out to be around 800 rated on chess.com, which is round beginner. So I pretty handily beat him in these 2 games, but they're still pretty interesting, so I still think we should review them. So goes e4. Right, here comes the review. E4, c5. Excuse me. So this is what is known as the Sicilian defense. It's where black tries to control the center with a flank pawn instead of the center pawn, right? Knight f3, knight c6. This is what is known as the open Sicilian after d4. Because this exchange is going to happen and the center of the board stays open. Like, let's say that after c5 I played knight c3, then I can't really play d4, so the position is going to stay closed. Like, I'm going to put my bishop out on c4, play d3. Knight f3, the position is going to be a little bit more closed, but after knight f3, knight c6, d4, we're going to get an exchange and the position opens up. So it's pretty self-explanatory. C takes, knight takes, and g6. This is what is known as the dragon variation, which is where black puts a bishop out on this diagonal to pressure my knight in the center. Knight c3, I just developed this knight guarding the pawn for knight f6 in the future. Bishop g7 attacks my knight with 2 pieces, so I defend it. Then we have pawn to d6, which has a couple of purposes. One is to stop e5 after black plays knight f6, and the other purpose is to maybe play e5. Right? Queen to d2, this creates a battery on this dark square diagonal and also prepares me to castle this way. And e5. And I had a little bit of a brain fart here. So, usually in the Sicilian, e5 is responded to by knight d to b5, attacking this pawn twice. But usually this bishop is still on f8 and defending the pawn. So let's say, like, let me give an example here. There is this line in the Sicilian known as the Lewenthal variation, where what black plays an early d5, and then white goes here, threatening the queen to, or threatening the knight to check here, and then the queen to come down. So black plays d6, and white cannot take this. This is the mainline move in the Lowenthal. But in this variation, the bishop is on g7 and not f8, so I could have gone here. But I had a little bit of a brain fart, and I played knight to b3, which is definitely still fine. Like, I'm still better in this position, but I could have gone knight to b5. Uh, Knight f6, right, and I had a audience moment here. So pawn to a6, right? Pawn to a6, knight takes d6. But if black tries to defend the pawn, there is a move here, and this is my first audience moment. And the hint I'm going to give you for this one is, how can white threaten a fork with a knight. And if you figured it out, this fork is defended by the queen, so you come and you play this knight to d5 to double threaten the fork. And there is almost nothing black can do against that. Right, so knight to b3, knight f6, this is still fine, like I said. Like, it's not like I'm losing because of that. Long castles, short castles. So we castle on opposite sides of the board, which means that we're just going to try to attack each other on either side. But what black should have done here is play knight to g4 and just kind of go after my bishop, because it can't go back and it can't go forward. So yeah, so this is a common idea, is to just grab this dark squared bishop so that there's no threat of this bishop ever being challenged. And if I played bishop to g5, attacking the queen f6, and then I try to back up like this, here is another audience moment. This one is a bit easier. What move can black play to win my queen? And if you found it, it is bishop to h6, pinning the queen to the king, defended by the knight on g4. Right. So yeah, I did not see that. But neither did he, and I just won a pawn on d6 because he didn't defend it. He played knight to b4, which this doesn't really have any direct ideas to it, so I was just like, hey, what are you doing there? And he played a bit of a fancy move here. He played knight to e8, attacking my rook. And I can't really take, because then I just lose my rook, and then this pawn is stupid, and I'm just down in exchange. Knight c6, right? Bishop c5, right? This move, oh, that was another audience moment. So, but I guess since I've gone past it, I noticed here that this rook was completely stuck here, and if I could put a bishop on this diagonal, I'd completely trap it because there's nothing that can block it. So I played bishop c5. This traps the rook. a5, and the rook still can't go anywhere. So I don't even have to take it on this move. I decided to get a little bit disrespectful, and I was just like, all right, I'm just going to develop my bishop. Like, you can't move the rook. a4, knight back to d2. I'm looking to maybe reroute this way and maybe pressure the pawn, or maybe play knight c4 and like pressure d6 or something. Bishop d7, and I take now because I didn't want him to be able to like move the knight and then be able to take my bishop back with the rook. So takes, and then king takes, rook f1. So I could have played knight c4, just like improving the position, pressuring this pawn. Should have played that, but rook h to f1, and this has a pretty simple idea, is to play f4 and to try to open up on that king, right? Because he played king takes f8 instead of bishop takes f8. Knight d4. Not really sure what that threatens. I mean, it does kind of threaten my bishop, but I just go up to d3. I guard my pawn. Bishop c6. And now I open up with f4. But again, knight c4 I could have played, but I didn't know what I was going to do if black played pawn to b5. But the computer's just like, yeah, knight to e3, and this is a lot better. Like, I don't really see what the computer wants from me here. Like after h5, like it wants king b1. Like, apparently these knights are just better positioned on this square, but I didn't see what I would do after b4. So after b5, so I played f4. King g8. He just not sure what that is. F takes c5, bishop takes c5, and I was calculating knight f3 in this position, but after this and this bishop kind of lives here, and he can't really take here because then he gets a little trapped with like maybe this and this, but apparently that's better. But bishop c4 has a very clear threat, and that threat is the f7 pawn, so he blocks it, and then I play g4. with the clear intention to play g5, force the knight to move, and then take on f7. And he plays a ridiculous move in this position. Like, obviously, I thought he was going to play knight takes g4, to which I would play this, king g7, knight c4, attacking the bishop. After bishop takes h2, I would take the knight. That's what I calculated. But he played knight takes e4, which just doesn't make any sense at all because that is attacked by two knights and only defended by one bishop, good sir. Bishop takes f7, king to g7 to not be on the line with my rook. Knight d takes, bishop takes, knight takes. So I just won another piece. Like, it's just very clearly winning. Rook f8, attacking my bishop, so I move back, pressuring this pawn and opening up the tension in between the rooks. Rook d8. Instead of taking, I go rook to f7 check, and here is where I march the king down the board. This is the epic checkmate march, the walk of shame, right? King h6, g5 check, king h5 is forced, rook takes h7, king g4 is forced, h3, king f3, check on f7, and he should have gone here. He should have gone here, to which I would have played like rook f2, and then he took, and he would just be on the side of the board, and that's really, really bad. But h3, king f3, rook f7, king e3, and this is the final interactive moment of this game. Find the mate in 3 for white, which I found in the game. It is a ladder mate, and if you know what a ladder mate is, it's when you have two pieces that control the files, like the horizontal and vertical lines like this. You just kind of walk the opponent down like a ladder. Find the mate in 3. And if you found it, it is check on d3. The king has to go down. Check on f2, guarded by the knight. The king has to go down. And then check on d1, and that's mate. Like, you see the ladder mate here, like, check, the king has to go down, and then you bring the other rung of the ladder, and then boom, you march the king down. Right. Okay, so that is the first game, and I kind of destroyed him and walked his king down the board, and then he was like, hey, you want a rematch? I want white this time. And I was like, okay, sure, like, I don't mind. I think you're probably going to lose, but, like, if you want it, that's fine. But, yeah, so we played a second game, and I was on the black pieces. And let me flip the board. e4, c6. This is my trusty Caro-Kann. You've heard me talk about it a bunch of times. d4, d5, e5. And there are two main moves in this position for black. The main line is bishop to f5, just developing the bishop outside the pawn chain, and then playing e6. But the sideline, which is a little bit more funky, is c5, with the intention of giving up the c-pawn to damage white's structure, develop, and quickly target those two pawns in the center. The e5, c5, and then c3. This is a very common response, to which I would play knight to c6, just intensifying the pressure on the center. Knight f3, bishop to g4, painting the knight, so that moves like queen b6 in the future come with the added threat of taking that pawn. Bishop to e2. What he should have done in this position was just clarify the situation right away, apparently. And after e6, the computer likes the move, bishop to e3, stopping me from taking. And if I take here, adding more pressure on this knight, there's queen to a4. And queen takes g4 if I block with the knight. And now the knight is no longer pinned, it can take this. So yeah, that's a fun way to lose a piece. But anyway, bishop to e2. And then I take. This is where I start messing up this opening a little bit. I take, and I should have gone queen to b6 in this position, just creating a threat on that pawn, and he can't really go here because I take on b2. But instead, I take first. I take first, and then play queen b6, and this is another interactive moment. What is wrong with this move? Right? I target the pawn. What is wrong with this move? And the hint that I'll give you is, how can white win a free pawn? Yeah, and if you found it, the simple answer is just bishop takes d5. Like I just blundered a pawn, and if I try to take here, just winning back my pawn, then bishop to e3 pins me to the queen. And if I try to take with the queen, then bishop takes c6 is check, removing the guard, and I just lose my queen. So yeah, that's brutal. But he did not see it. He played bishop to e3. Queen b2. I take the pawn, and apparently he still should have gone bishop takes d5 in this position, because if I take the rook, then queen to b3, and my queen is stuck. Like it can't move. Knight d2. Knight takes d4. Knight takes d4. And this is an interactive moment. What is the move that white has to fork my king and that knight and win it? And if you found it, queen to a4 check. Hitting this, hitting the king, and hitting the knight with two pieces, and he's just going to win it back with the better position. But instead, he plays castles, which just allows me to take on f3 and kind of clarify the situation. Queen to b5, I get out of the way because I don't really like the fact that like rook b1, queen a3, and then he's going to take on b7, so I just get out of the way. So if he plays rook b1, which he does, then I could go back to d7, a6, c6, one of these squares. Queen d3, and he finally allows me to play e6. And now I'm better because this pawn was a liability for the whole opening, and now I can play e6 and sort of solidify things. And I was like kind of unsure why he played the move queen to d3, but he showed me why he played the move queen to d3. He played the move queen to d3 because for some reason he wanted to play rook to b5 and have the queen defend the rook. Like I don't really know what the purpose of that is at all. Like maybe he wanted to like double up and go here, but like why did he have to go rook b5? Why couldn't he have gone like here and here if he wanted to do that? Like I don't know. But 97, which is a great move because if he doubles up, then I play b6 and I play knight c6 because his idea after b6 was to go a4 a5. Knight c6 is a good response to this because he can't go a4 because I take with the knight, right? I take with the knight. Knight d4, which does attack the knight, but at the same time it blunders e5 with a hit on the queen. Like every move in chess changes things about the position. You defend certain things, attack certain things, and you also undefend certain things. And that pawn was left when the knight left its protection. Queen d1, moving out of the attack. Bishop c5. And then he plays a5, and folks, I make a very, very bad move in this position. I decide to add another layer of protection on this pawn and play rook to b8. And audience, can you find the move that I saw right after I let my rook go? Right, I realized that I made this blunder right after I made the move, and I tried to like hide my face so that he didn't know that I made a really bad move. What is a way that white can exploit a pin to win a piece? And if you found it, the move is rook takes c5. Because after takes, I lose this with check, so I can't take back the knight. and I'm forced to either move the king up and lose another rook, or block with the queen and lose the queen. But he didn't see it, and I immediately snapped off the knight. He took on e5, which was obviously the wrong move because I just take with that bishop and get out of the queen's attack. Whew, I breathed a pretty audible sigh of relief at this point because now I know I'm winning. A takes, rook takes. And instead of taking and allowing him to control the file, I instead castle because my rook is defended by bishop and rook, and he almost took in this position, but then he saw my bishop, and I'm glad that he didn't take because that would have been kind of heartbreaking for him. Queen e1, attacking my bishop, right? Rook takes b6. I gain a tempo because he can't take back, or else I get it's mate on the back rank. Rook takes b6, and the computer said that here I could have played bishop takes h2 because after king takes, I would take, and then fork the rook and the king. Which I kind of used a similar idea a little bit later, but that was a more direct way to do it. Queen c7, and then you see here, take, king f1. Yeah, so I played queen c7, I threatened the rook, and I threatened this, but there was a more direct way to do it, of course, by doing this and then forking. Queen b1, defending the rook, and now I play bishop takes, king f1, and noticing that these two are on the same file, and that my bishop and queen battery still controls this, I go here. I'm forcing trades, I'm up a piece, and the less pieces white has is going to be easier for me, right? Rook takes b8, queen takes b8. The bishop still defends the queen from across the board, so that would just be a trade. Queen to c2, getting out of the way. Queen b5 check. I'm just sort of bringing my pieces closer to the king. G6, G3, he traps my bishop, and I have a couple options here. I could go here, I could just start pushing the pawns, or I could sacrifice. I'm just up 4 pawns, so it doesn't really matter. Like if I lose a bishop, because I'm up 4 freaking pawns. Queen b4, king f2, check. I'm just getting closer with the queen, and then I play e5. I start pushing pawns. Queen c8, king g7. He can't check me. He retreats to h3. e4, g4. I check on d2 and then push. And in this position, white resigned because there is no way for him to stop this. And it's like almost checkmate. And that is how those 2 games against the beginner went. Like that, that second game, I very much messed up the opening, and he didn't punish me for it. And I also made that very bad blunder with the rook. So yeah, that was definitely my worst game out of the 4. But now I'm playing a different opponent, and this guy is he said he was about 1200 rated, but over the board and not chess.com, because this guy has never played online chess, believe it or not. That's what he said. So let's just start the review. And this game was quite interesting. d4. He played d4, and what I like to do against d4 is play knight f6. This is a very flexible move. It sort of allows me to still respond to any of white's choices. Like white could play knight f3, white could play c4, white could play knight f3, white could play even g3, bishop g2, bishop f4, and in this position he plays bishop f4, and my heart sank. Because what this is the accelerated London system. This is an opening that white plays that is uber solid and very hard for even much higher rated opponents to prove an advantage against, just because it is so solid. And also, like, even if you play optimally against it, there still might be attacking chances against your king just due to this. Like, it's almost like a cheat code for beginner chess, the London, because just you get the same kinds of positions and you just attack people if they make a mistake. But luckily, I kind of know how to play against the London, so that kind of didn't happen to me. I mean, you'll see what I'm talking about later. But yeah, the opening is pretty standard. Like e3, bishop f5. We're just kind of getting our pieces out. c3, e6, knight f3, bishop d6. And the main line uh, in the London here after bishop d6 is to back up to g3. Because the idea is that if I take, you open up your rook against my king if I castle this way. Which is why on the London, white often waits to castle because they don't know when this is going to happen. And if their king is here on this square instead of the rook, it's not as good for them. But instead of bishop to d6, what I should have played here is pawn to c5. Now I played this a little bit later. Uh, wait, no. This actually is not what I should have played, but it's what a lot of people play in this position. And white actually has a funny little trick here, which kind of looks a little outlandish. I think I remember like in a couple weeks ago in my video, Gary did something like this against me and I made fun of him for it. But in this position, there's actually a known little trick that white can do, which is bishop takes b8, right? Bishop takes b8. And if rook takes b8, bishop b5 check. And you may be like, well, you don't have to move the king, you don't have to move the queen because black can block with the knight. But audience, do you see the move for white? And the hint I will give you this time is how can you apply more pressure on this pin? And if you saw it, the move is knight to e5. The move is knight to e5. And white's just going to win that knight because black can't even defend it with a rook. They only defend it with queen and king, so they're just going to lose it. So, yeah, this is why I played bishop to d6 now, because I remembered that bishop takes b8 trick. Bishop g3, castles. Bishop e2, we're just, like, see how solid white is playing? Like, white does not have to take any risk in this opening. Knight e4. This, I thought, was almost a guarantee at winning that bishop, but I was a little bit afraid of bishop h4 because he hits my queen. But I could have just slid out of the way and then played bishop to e7 and then just traded, and I feel like I would have been all right. But after knight e4, he plays bishop or knight b to d2. And I don't know what came over me in this position, but I was still afraid to take this. I was still afraid to take this because I was like, well, he opens up his rook on my king, but what exact attacking plan can he follow here? If he jumps his knight forward, I just take it. If he moves his knight back here, sure, he opens this up, but he blocks his rook and other pieces from coming here. Like, he doesn't have any solid attacking plans, and I can just play knight d7, knight f6, and like bishop e7 or queen or like bring my queen over, and I could just bring a bunch of defensive pieces over there, and that's actually not really a big deal for me. I don't know why I played knight e4 and then didn't take this. Doesn't really make much sense, but we don't have to harp on that. Instead, knight takes c4 happened, right? Because I played c5 in this position. Takes. I take with the bishop because I did not very much like the idea of like allowing the knight out here, hitting my bishop, and then this pressure still existing in the center. Knight takes d4 here, bishop d3, and I have a choice to make. I could take on d3, I could take on f3, I could take on g3, or I could play c4. These are like the moves, right? Or I could take on d4 even. Like there's lots of choices here for black, and most of them are okay. But the one I choose is not okay. The one I choose is c4. And the reason why this is bad is because bishop takes d3, which is what, or I'm sorry. Yeah, the reason why it's bad is because bishop takes e4, d takes e4, and knight to d2. forking the pawns, and I'm just going to lose one of them. Like, there's no way around it. I am shocked that I didn't see that. But what I should have done is bishop takes d3, by the way, queen d3, c takes d4, and then the computer's just like, play h6. I'm not even going to pretend to know what the hell the point of that is. But the computer's just like, h6, dummy. Like, that's what you have to play here, obviously. c4 takes, and knight e5. He doesn't go knight to d2. He plays knight e5, and I go queen c7 because I'm, just applying extra pressure on that knight. And I want to play knight b to d7 because if I played knight b to d7 in this position, I was a little afraid of the fact that my bishop would be unguarded and that there might be some, like, this doesn't work, obviously, because, like, h takes g6 and bishop takes bishop, and it's not really too great for white, but I was just afraid of kind of undefending my bishop like that, so I played queen to c7 first, and then I was going to play this. But queen to e2, targeting my pawn, so I guard it. Pretty straightforward. f4, and in this position, he was hoping that I would play en passant, because what that does is it just opens up his position and allows him great pressure on my king. But the problem for him is if I don't play en passant, I'm better. Pawn to f6, hitting the knight. It has to go back here. And I get a little too carried away with trying to chase the knight back. I play h5. And the reason why that's bad might not be immediately obvious to you, but basically he's forced to go back to f2. And do you see the problem? He attacks this with the knight, and he attacks this with the queen. That's the problem. It's not really too bad for me because, like I said before, even if he does take this pawn, he doesn't really have a quick attack on my king because his pawns are still here and he isn't castled yet. It's not the end of the world for me. Like, I defend my center pawn because obviously a center pawn is more important than some random flank pawn. Queen takes h5, and so I didn't write this down as an audience moment, but I think it's a fun one to do. Like, instead of finding like a tactical sort of thing, try to find like a general idea. And the hint that I'm going to give you for this one is find a two-move maneuver to bring the knight in, to defend the attack, and improve the knight's position. And if you manage to find it, the idea is knight to d7, because you're just going to play knight f6, and you're going to chase the queen back, and maybe you're going to kind of clog the arteries with knight to g4. He plays knight h3, I go here, I attack the queen, he backs up, and then I play bishop to e7. I'm not really sure why I did that. I should have played b4, because if takes, I take with check. Then he shifts over because he tries to, sees this, he wants to walk over here because this is where he's safer, right? Then I play c3. He takes, queen takes. And this is just a little bit too much for, well, like rook c8 is coming, and things are gonna start falling, right? But I play bishop to e7, which I'm honestly not even really sure why I played that. Knight g5. And the idea for him is to clear the queen to come in and deliver a mate on h7, which I don't know why he didn't do here. Like, he should have done that, but he plays h4. So I go knight d5. I just kind of position my knight more actively. And again, he had another opportunity here to play queen h5. And by the way, the reason I was letting him play here is because I could just bring my knight back. And I kind of saw it as like, maybe if he goes back, we could repeat moves, and it would be a draw. So like, I didn't see any idea for him after knight f6. And I think he agreed with me because after knight to d5, he long castled. And he wants to bring his pieces over here to attack. But yeah, queen h5, queen h5, right? And that threatens this. Not sure why he didn't do that. But anyway, long castles and rook to f6 because now I kind of noticed the queen h5 thing and I'm like, all right, if he goes here, I'm just going to put the rook here and I blockade his pawns and his like entire attack over here, and then I can play this and just attack his king. It's kind of like a counterattack. He plays h5, rook c8. And the purpose of rook c8 is to defend this pawn. Because I thought that after this, he could take my pawn. And I didn't see any refutation of that. But of course, after takes, rook c8, that's just not, you can't hold on to that. Like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think I just got a little bit paranoid about like h6 or something. So I was like, all right, I'm going to defend this. And if h6 I take, then I'm going to play here and I'm not going to lose this pawn. Bishop h4. And now I play b4. And now white is in trouble. Now white is in trouble because if I'm allowed to take and he takes back, that is a fork on queen and rook. So he can't do that. And if he tries to, let's say, play knight takes c4, doing this, then I take, and take. And then if he takes, I just push forward with c3. And even though he is up 2 points of material, I'm completely winning because I'm just opening the door on his king, and his attack over here is non-existent. Queen d2, and I take. And it's over for white. Like this game was a very quick turnaround. It was basically just like him attacking over here, me defending, but defending slightly inaccurately. But then the second he takes his foot off the gas, I attack. Queen to d2, like the best move for him was to play this and to sacrifice the 2 pieces for the rook. But queen to d2, he defends. He thinks he's defending this pawn, but after b takes c3, c takes d, or b takes c3, find the move here for black. And the hint that I'm going to give you is, how do you get another piece involved and check the king? So this one should have been a little easy because there's only one check that you can give in this position, and that is bishop to h3. That is bishop to h3, or a3. And king b1, rook b8 check, king a1. And the idea is not to go here, by the way. This is absolutely not the idea because you can't mate on either one of these squares, and white is just going to liquidate. White is just going to play rook to b1 and force you back to e8 and then trade. That's all white is going to do. So you have to be careful. The only way to continue the attack for black is bishop to b2 check, which is what I play, with the idea of winning the queen. Because even if the queen blocks, obviously you take it. And that is the end of the game. He resigned because he was going to lose his queen. Ooh, that game was extremely sloppy, but I still won. And the kind of takeaway from that one is, even if your opponent's attacking your king in an opposite side castling position, you always have to keep an eye on if you can counterattack. Because if your counterattack is strong enough, you can force him to pay attention to that instead of attacking your king, and you can get a better position. But now, let's get into the final game. This is my game as white against this 1200 rated opponent. And when I played this game, I thought it was very, very good. I thought it was like a very positionally like masterful game, but it wasn't. It was a little bit more sloppy than I thought at the time, because mainly because he has this one ridiculous defensive idea for a lot of the middle game that neither of us even came close to seeing. But why talk about it before the game? Let's just get into it. E4, of course. Like, I play E4, and he plays the Caro-Kann against me. D4, D5, E5, bishop F5. Like I said before, this is the main line. And my favorite weapon against this is H4. And this is actually a trap line. Not really at the highest level, but like if someone has never seen this before, right? The point of bishop to F5 is to be able to play E6. But what happens after this? And my hint for you is, how can white win a bishop in two moves? And if you found it, the answer is pawn to G4. And I think I was a bit inaccurate when I said two moves, because black could either go back here and lose the bishop like this, or black could try to stick around, then F3, and you just trap the bishop, and you're up a piece. But he sees that. He plays H6. I play G4 anyway, just to chase him back. He goes back to H7, and then bishop to D3. And he makes a very bad move in this position. He plays pawn to G6, because I think he was afraid of like me taking his bishop and then playing like queen to D3 and attacking his rook or something, but he could have just gone back. Like that was fine. But in this position, folks, there is a common sacrifice. I'm going to give you a hint. And the hint is, find a sacrifice to damage black's structure. And this one was a little difficult, but if you managed to get it, congratulations. The move is pawn to E6. The move is pawn to E6. This is an extremely common sacrifice against the Caro-Kann when the bishop can't take back on E6. Like, if the bishop could take, then it wouldn't do anything. But after F takes E6, I'd severely damage the structure. And this is just extremely, extremely bad. And I can play like queen E2, trying to win that pawn back, or knight F3, knight E5, and like queen F7 even ideas. But yeah, E6 he takes, and I play knight F3. Then he develops his bishop out. He has eyes on this. And what I should have done here was play H5. What I should have done here was play H5, because if he played G5, then the idea was to take, and then go queen D3. Just improving the position of my queen, awkwardly positioning his rook, and then developing my pieces, and maybe then playing knight E5, right? But I rush a little bit, honestly. I play knight E5, he takes, and then queen to C7. What this does is it attacks the pawn. And there's a couple ways for me to defend it. I could play F4, I could play here, or I could play queen to E2. I choose wrong. I play bishop to F4. And I don't really know why that's wrong. Oh, yeah. It's because of knight F6. Yeah. And the idea that if you take, then queen takes F4, and if takes, then queen E5 check, and the B2 pawn falls with a fork. I did not see that. And neither did he, because he played knight B to D7, or knight to D7. Queen E2. I defend the pawn, and he long castles. I then play queen to E3, which in my eyes was a fork, because I hit this, and I hit this. But the truth is, if he defends over here, like, honestly, taking on H6, like, that's not good at all, actually, because, queen takes E5, and that B2 pawn falls again. But he plays rook to F8. And not really sure why he played that. And you may be like in this position, well, Haley, can't you take on a7? No, that prevents queen a7 because you dropped the rook, which I saw. Bishop g3. My idea of bishop g3 was to play f4 and like forever blunt this rook. h5 is a huge mistake because now I'm able to play this. And this is the key of this game, folks. 1, 2, 3 of black's pieces cannot move. This knight can't go here, or here, or here. This pawn is stopping these pawns from pushing up and clearing this. If the knight can't move, the rook can't move. And if this pawn is blockaded, the bishop can't move. And if the knight can't move, the bishop can't go here. So these pieces are just three peas in a pod in the corner here, unable to move, and just kind of watching in horror as their position gets decimated. But it's not as good as I thought it was in the game. And you will see why later. c5, f4. Pawn to d4, and I make the wrong decision in this position. I should have just backed up to e2, and then I would be completely fine. But instead I played queen to e4. And this is Ask the Audience, and if you get this, I am going to be very impressed. My hint to you is, how can black sacrifice one of these pieces and then sacrifice a pawn to counterattack and punish the position of this queen? And if you somehow miraculously found the idea, it's knight to h6. And the idea is, if you take, this pawn can now move forward and attack the queen. And queen takes, and g takes f4, guarded by the rook, and now black is winning. But he definitely didn't find that in the game. Instead, he played knight b6. And there's going to be a lot of like misses and blunders by me, but it's all because black could have played knight h6. So, I mean, if knight h6 didn't exist, I had a very, very nice game. But knight h6 would have just been a cold shower. Knight d2. I want to just eye these light squares over here and just kind of prevent that in the future for him from maneuvering there. Rook d8 is a mistake because he could have played knight h6 again. a4, I'm going after the knight. Knight d5, and I push a5. And again, it's a mistake because he can play knight h6. This is the tough thing about game reviews, because like you see all these mistakes and you think you're making like individual mistakes, but you're literally just blundering this same thing over and over again, and black is missing this same thing over and over again, so they're getting mistakes and blunders. Knight to b4, just going after my bishop. Then bishop to c4. I get out of the way and I threaten this pawn, which I thought was a very, very powerful threat. But he could just play knight to d5 and get in my way, which he did not do. Instead, he played king. He defended with the king, which I thought was ridiculously brazen. But instead, I play knight to b3, eyeing this pawn. But I should have castled. Even though all these pawns are pushed up, I should have castled because these pieces can't move. So what kind of attack is he going to generate on my king over here? If he plays knight h6 in this position, by the way, I take, and after g5, bishop to bishop takes e6 check. Looks like a bishop sacrifice, but then check. And takes, guarded by the rook. And castling would have prevented knight h6 via that continuation. But I did not castle. And he went b6, takes, bishop to f2. The idea of that was to set up like a sacrifice here where I just activate and like try to get rook a7 in the future, like protected by the bishop. Queen to c6. This is a mistake. Hint I will give you: How can white infiltrate and attack the king? If you saw it, the move was rook to a7 check, forcing the king to move, then trading the queens and playing bishop to b5, pinning the knight. And then when the rook defends, rook to a6, attacking the pawn, and then you're going to attack the knight. And remember, these pieces cannot move. So the only thing you can defend with is rook and king. King of 7, he's just like kind of trying his best to move anything in this position. Rook takes b6, knight to b4. Yeah, this is where like the kind of masterclass part comes in, because like if we ignore all those times he could have played knight h6, like now these pieces are actually trapped. Now knight h6 is just the loss of a knight. c3 was a bit of a minor inaccuracy because of knight to d5, just double targeting that pawn, and if I took, then I would blunder my rook. So rook to c6. I almost forced a trade here. Takes, and knight takes f4, which I'm not worried about because I noticed the possibility of pinning that knight to the king in the future. C takes, and bishop takes. So I just I went a pawn and I clear up this, right? Knight h6. He now goes for knight h6, which is of all the times that he could have played it, this is like one of the worst times because now it's just a full blunder of a piece, although he does free up his rook, which is why he did that. But then in this position, I pull up with best move, by the way. I pull up with the move 36 short castle, pinning the knight to the king. Oh my god. It is so funny when you can castle like this. Like there is no reason for you to castle because you're not hiding from anything, but the idea is putting the rook on f1. And I could have just played rook f1, but I wanted to be a little bit more fancy. King to g8. And now begins the long process of trying to hunt this king out with the bishops and the rook. Bishop c5, attacking the pawn, and then threatening to come down here. Rook to g3 check. I attack the rook. Rook to b3. Attacking my pawn, I take on e7. I am one move away from mate. So how does he stop it? Check. King moves, check. King moves, check. Uh-oh. I've traded the rooks. But is this really that bad? That's the question. And the answer is no, it's not, because I'm ultimately going to win this pawn, and he can't push these two pawns at all. g5 check, king takes. Bishop f5, king takes. I just pick up two of the pawns immediately. He then goes to h7, bishop e8, just eyeing these light squares over here, planning to go here maybe. Bishop e4, I move there, and then I'm just going to win the pawn. But I could have done like some very long, like look at this, mate in 19. Like what human is going to see this? Apparently after bishop to f8, I had mate in 18 more moves. Yeah, I can't believe I missed that one. Yeah. King to h5, takes, and now it's just an easy win. Bishop g5, I move out of the way, and then I put the king here, rolling out the red carpet for the pawn to promote, and it's just over, and in this position, he resigned. So, I think I'm still going to classify this as a very good game that I played, with the exception of allowing knight h6 like 57 moves in a row. Like, I feel like that's a ridiculously high level blunder to spot. So I'm still going to say I played a decent game, but it's definitely not one of my best games ever. And with that, folks, I will see you again in the next video.